Looking into the future, the beginner faces a choice that leads him to the triumph, or not. Being surrounded by like-minded professionals can be the best guarantee that you actually take that crucial career step.
Sport in Global is a digital network for sports jobs. It gives you the chance to be involved in the sports industry no matter who you are, regardless of gender, nationality, and experience.
Our AI system matches up talent with human resources. Candidates who align with the company's values and needs immediately get shortlisted. It saves time for HR and increases the opportunities available to applicants.
The platform identifies tailor-made recommendations based on user needs, so you're always aware of the possibilities out there right now.
Sport in Global is a place where students gain key tips about jobs and build the valuable connections that are essential for people at the beginning of their career path.
The path from candidate to champion starts with a single step in the right direction. Sign up to Sport in Global.
Sport in Global, the best way to enter.
Okay, now it's time for our fourth speaker. His name is Hisham Shehabi. Hisham Shehabi is the co-founder and COO of N3XT Sports, a strategic consultancy agency that specializes in end-to-end innovation, technology, and investment strategy. Before co-creating N3XT Sports, Hisham led in many managerial roles with the International Olympic Committee and with the Bahrain Olympic Committee. Hisham has a master's in advanced studies in sports and technology from the International Academy of Sports Science and Technology, and has served on the board of the Swiss Association of Sports Managers, the Bahrain Roadrunners, and other sports organizations. Hisham, welcome with us today to the Sport in Global Summit.
Thank you, Christian. Good to be here. Good morning to you, I guess, right?
Yep. Good morning to those in the United States. Early morning.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. And I'll be sharing a screen here. So just give me a moment. All right. So can you see the presentation? Christian, is that a yes? Yes?
Yes, it's loading. Yep, now we see it.
All right, perfect. So good to be with you, everyone, and really happy to be presenting here. Thank you for the opportunity to share the stage with such amazing speakers. The chance to look at Alexander's presentation just now, and really excited by the energy that's coming into the sports industry. And that's really kind of the impetus behind setting up our company a few years ago. So as Christian mentioned, we're a sports technology and innovation consulting company. And our main mission is to support the sports industry in a changing landscape, which includes all the types of stakeholders that did not exist even just 5 years ago. And so today I'd like to focus a little bit on an area that is close to my focus in the company, which is on the Olympic industry. As a company, our main focus is really on the topics that were mentioned earlier, and we focus on football and the Olympics, mainly in the European, Middle Eastern, and Asian markets. Even though we are a US registered company, and even though I'm calling you from the US, our focus is really on the East. And some of the things that we're seeing in our client work and our prospect work, even just trends in the market, tend to focus on, let's say, the positive side, whereas there's actual tensions on how organizations deal with change. And I think that it's important to talk about these trends, So starting off, let's kind of take it high level. Some of the revenue streams that were talked about in the last hour and a half, obviously, are new to the industry. And so traditional sources of revenue, as we know them within the Olympic industry, are sponsorship, broadcasting, events, registration, and subsidies. And by Olympic entities, I'd like to define them here as national Olympic committees, national federations of specific sports, international associations, regional associations, event organizers. And while while a lot of focus is on football, let's say, this wider group of sports entities has not evolved as quickly as the capital-intensive football industry has. And so I think it's important to remember that for the last 40 years, these are the revenue streams. So with sponsorship, I think that's quite normal, and yet it's important to remember that sponsorship comes with events, and not as institutional partners as much. Broadcasting is actually a very small percentage for many different sports entities. Events themselves are usually funded by cities that host the events and government entities that come in to kind of invest in bringing events to their country as a way for achieving some societal goals. Registration in this case is meant as membership registration or licensing of coaches. And so this is a bit more of the side of the market that's dealing with governance and regulation of a specific sport. And then finally, subsidies. So a lot of these entities across the Olympic industry are funded by government, are funded by grants. A lot of national federations around the world, a lot of national Olympic committees around the world are actually funded by their international bodies. So without them, they'd really be in a very bad situation. So this is kind of like if you think about the economics of sports entities, this is kind of what drives them. And obviously, all of this is under threat at the moment. Some of the numbers that came out in the last months, and this number from May by Two Circles, talking about the drop in global sponsorship, $17.2 billion, which is quite large, no matter how relatively the drop is. It was like a 45% expected drop, right? Which is massive in its own right, but just the numbers we're talking about here are quite large. And they really start to hurt those that are not in a good position to organize their events on a regular basis. And in our discussions, and this number is an anecdotal number from the number of Olympic, non-Olympic, summer and winter sports federations that we work with. All of them have a very negative view as to how low the revenue will go. And this ranges from about 30% to even to a 70% drop in the revenues this year. And this is expected to continue for the coming year as well, 2021. Whereas initially there was an expectation, I think by everybody, myself included, that we would kind of come back into a very quick U-shape recovery. Now this is not looking as it will be the case. So these numbers will be lower for quite some time. And this is all happening due to COVID. And yet, in the last few years, there has been a shift. We've moved from a big sports industry to really a sportainment industry, where we're competing with the likes of Netflix and the attention economy. We are witnessing exponential technologies such as cloud storage, 5G, and processing speeds that are really allowing for a lowering of barriers of entry into the sports industry. So you have new players coming in. Consumers are changing their habits of how they consume sports and how they interact with their sports entities. Many sports entities are actually investing into becoming an always-on content generating entity. Brands are entering, and owning sports events on their own right, or owning sports teams in their own right. And there's a lot of capital coming in. So there's a lot of capital coming into the top, as I mentioned, with sports like football, rugby, tennis, basketball across the entire globe. While at the same time, we have a lot of big technology companies such as Microsoft, such as Amazon, such as Google, that are coming in. And so all of this is a perfect storm for sports entities. And so our role really is to kind of translate this change into potential opportunities, because as I mentioned, there's a lot of new players that did not exist before that are competing on the same stage as sports organizations that never had to that had a monopolistic, let's say, handle on their sport or on their events. Big businesses are coming in, and there's a disintermediation with information becoming very, very available. Platforms such as Sport and Global coming in to really create a new way of interacting between employers and those seeking employment in the sports industry. All of these things are possible today because of the trends that have been happening over the last 5 to 10 years. Now, what has happened in the last 2 to 3 years is broadcasting revenues have started to be challenged, and they're not going as high up as they used to, which starts to then put some pressure on all of the revenue streams. And yet, in this context, we see a lot of great ideas. We see a lot of amazing entrepreneurs. We see a lot of investors willing to take a chance on the sports industry as it professionalizes, to create these new business models, these new operating models, and to work with new partners. So a lot of our work is really about how to translate all of this amazing energy happening in the industry into tangible, sustainable institutional change. Because at the end, even though there are lots of great ideas, that you have to be able to bring them in-house into the entities. So in our work, we've recognized 3 main areas, and naturally they speak to our strengths, but these are things that we believe Olympic entities such as national Olympic committees, national federations, organizing committees of any type of event, any member-based or federated body will need to kind of shift towards. And so I'll spend the next 5 to 10 minutes talking about that before wrapping up. And the first thing which is clear is that there needs to be a new activity within a sports entity, which is ecosystem development. If you think about sports entities, again, like the ones I mentioned, they're quite siloed, which is, I think, a term across many industries, not only sports. But what that does is it creates a specific type of relationship between an internal department and the stakeholders that they interact with around the world. So, for example, in a National Olympic Committee, the commercial director and the sporting director would never speak to the same entity. Or if they spoke to the same entity, they would speak to very separate departments within that entity. And so what this does is that it creates a kind of like little kingdoms that need to be protected internally, because it's all about the stakeholder management and representing their agenda internally. So the problem with today's amazing kind of ecosystem growth, with startups and technology companies and universities and research centers, is that they're not able to find easy ways to interact with sports entities, and now you've seen a little bit of a growth of kind of the accelerators that have started to become, or to partner with sports entities as a way for them to bring in the right deal flow to sports entities through a mechanism that they manage. But there's typically nobody within sports entities, especially kind of if you go from the bigger ones to the smaller ones, that can deal with all of these the new entities which are looking to add value. And as Alexander said, with Socios is even willing to put the capital on behalf of the sports entity to create a revenue share model that is really useful. So all of these things that we're seeing is a structural issue within the sports entities, wherein they're not able to develop and manage and grow an ecosystem of stakeholders that has started to kind of enter the sports industry. And so a lot of our work at Next Sports is about helping sports entities to figure out how they develop an ecosystem, not only so that they can interact with just amazing startups and investors and accelerators, but to actually take advantage of them in moments such as the one in COVID, where you're not suddenly tasked with going to find a great fan engagement tool for COVID times or a contactless payment application. You already have these in your system. And so what we talk about is how to manage these relationships, how to have a external facing value proposition as a sports entity, not only to your traditional stakeholders, but how do I provide a platform for a budding startup from a European country to test its product, to market its product, to communicate with me to another entity. These are the types of activities that a proper ecosystem manager should have in mind. So that's kind of the first thing that we believe will be very important for modern sports entities in the Olympic movement. The second one is having the ability not only to have identified all of the great ideas and projects, but having also a way to refine, choose, test, kind of pilot those projects and to scale them. And so this is a very new concept within the sports entity. To think like a product development manager is new, just because the product has been the same for a really long time, and the let's say the responsibility of innovating on the product has rested specifically with your broadcasters, with your sponsors, and with anybody kind of like with a commercial aspect. And this was typically something that sports entities still, in the majority of the time, cedes this responsibility away from the organization, because the sports organization is made up of people that know how to organize sporting events, that know how to put the rules together, that know how to appoint technical officials, but not necessarily ones that are equipped or given the mandate to develop products as we know them as a group today. And so a lot of our work is on developing this type of process in what we call an innovation strategy. And so what this does is really looking at the structure of the sports entity today. And it's important for the clients we work with that they know that innovation doesn't require a huge amount of investment. It requires a very concerted effort in developing a framework, a methodology, an agreed upon methodology that permeates the whole organization and drives ideas from the generation, from the generating of ideas, all the way to testing them and even killing them. So you need to know when to kind of kill some ideas as well. But this process it could seem quite straightforward here, but it's important to create a culture that incentivizes ideas to come through, that has a way to test them in a very, very easy way, and that is constantly being updated by what's happening on the market. Again, something that would be easier once an ecosystem is in place. And then that is strengthened again once you have an innovation strategy and kind of like your idea pipeline management, we like to call it. So thirdly, I mean, this is a topic that's kind of on top of everybody's mind today, is digital transformation as a topic. And here there's two sides to the coin. We see it, obviously you need to be developing all these amazing digital assets. You need to be able to offer new ways for fans and for partners to interact with and to consume your content. And yet at the same time, you need to be able to internally be efficient to operationalize this digital strategy. So our work, again, focuses on these two areas. And so when we come in to look at a sports entity, so for example, the National Olympic Committee's digital infrastructure, we definitely look at the digital assets, which is what they can offer to their current partners or to new partners. But we first take a look at kind of in-house. What does their CRM look like? What does their marketing process look like? How do they manage projects? How do they manage communications internally? How do they account for the payments? How do they distribute per diems? All of these things are quite manual. You'll find a lot of sports entities, even in 2020, with rooms full of folders and papers that have yet to be actually transformed into kind of digital age. And so even though there's a very kind of large and growing digital and tech literate workforce in the sports industry, a lot of sports entities today in the Olympic movement are not using the right tools. So this is the basis of the work we do. And then the second part is obviously the commercialization and the creation of digital assets that can strengthen either the existing sponsorship portfolio or to create new avenues for commercialization. And what this has done, specifically in the cases that we're working on, is it's allowed for the next cycle of media rights or next cycle of commercial rights to be priced at a higher value. And so this is something that's I think becoming clearer and clearer to sports entities, that there is a value from investing in digital transformation. We all obviously work remotely and use Zoom, and probably in some entities there's like a suite of tools that's used by a specific provider, and this sometimes is seen as enough of a step by sports entities. And so our real kind of objective within our digital transformation projects is to go from yes, the suite of tools is great, but let's figure out a way to increase the value of your fan database by understanding them first and foremost. As you'll know from probably the presentations that passed and from the entrance of the big tech companies, is that there are like people that are more like tech savvy and data savvy, and those that are not. And so sports entities are usually in a worse bargaining power position when it comes to managing the data flows of their fans. And so what we do first of all is try to understand those flows, and then who owns that data, and how to get all of that data to come into a central repository that is the single source of truth for the sports entities. And this allows them to personalize communications, personalize content, to attract specific types of sponsorships, and generally to increase the value of the pie. And so all of these three things that I talked about very quickly are the basis of the work we do. So innovation strategy to develop to generate ideas from a new ecosystem of stakeholders that has not existed before for sports entities, and then having a very a digital infrastructure in place that allows the entity to take advantage of new trends coming into the market, to respond to what the fans actually want, what their athletes actually want. Some of the projects like we're looking at and working on are related to how, for example, you can take athletes and co-develop projects with them that benefit their kind of brand, but also help them invest into their post-career, into startups or technology ideas that could be very interesting for them. And so we're already kind of seeing this on the market. So these are just some examples which I've discussed in the past, but high level. British Rowing signed a partnership with a Sensei, a sports tech company, back in November to create apparel that is smart and speaks to rowers as they row, to give them the guidance on how they should be rowing in terms of their form. USA Cycling and Copen, they developed a wearable technology and smart glasses for track cyclists that gives them information in real time. And this was a project that they worked on with IBM as well in the US. And again, this created now tech that was relevant first for the track cyclists, but then that was something that the company could commercialize, and that USA Cycling could say that we are an entity that helps tech companies to commercialize products with high performance athletes. So again, the messaging becomes very, very interesting and attracts new types of sponsors. And then you'll see as well, just a few weeks ago, a group of elite athletes with Shaun White, Michael Phelps, Maria Sharapova launched a new offering called The Skills. So, all of these different examples exist today, and they all depend on kind of these type of investments made by sports entities. And so that's really what we do. And the aim is always to kind of reduce the, let's say that not reduce the importance, but reduce the percentage of the revenue mix within a sports entity on the traditional revenue streams, and try to unlock new revenue streams that we all know are possible, but that are very difficult for sports entities as they're structured today to take advantage of. And so with that, I'll close off and thank you for listening.